Hello, I'm Tessa Spencer, an archivist in the Outreach and Learning team at the National Records of Scotland, NRS. This talk will provide an introduction to the Forfeited Estates papers found among the Exchequer records in the National Records of Scotland, NRS. These papers are the records of the administration of the estates forfeited in 1690, 1715 and 1745 because their owners supported the Jacobite cause. For the purpose of this talk, due to the extent of the collection, I have attempted to focus on those records post-1745. However, you could devote a lifetime to this research. I will explain the background to these records and how and why they were compiled. I will give an overview of their contents and highlight some interesting and surprising examples which can help with family and local history research. Lastly, I will explain the collection's arrangement and provide guidance on how you can access the papers in the Historical Search Room at General Register House in Edinburgh. Before I begin, I will give you a brief introduction to who we are at the NRS, what we do and hold. NRS is a non-ministerial department of the Scottish Government and was established on the 1st of April 2011, following the merger of the National Archives of Scotland and the General Register Office for Scotland. We have a duty to collect, preserve and produce information about Scotland's people and history and make it available to inform current and future generations. NRS holds around 80 kilometres, 49.7 miles of records, which are stored in secure and temperature-controlled rooms. The records span from the 12th to the 21st centuries, touching on virtually every aspect of Scottish life. Our oldest document dates back to around 1124, a charter by David I granting lands to the Church of St Cuthbert in Edinburgh. There are also over 1.7 million records within the digital repository, totaling 2.7 terabytes of data. For comparison, 2.7 terabytes is roughly equivalent to 225 million pieces of A4 paper. We are responsible for the public and legal records of Scotland, but we also have many local and private archives. They relate to a variety of subjects, including the church, law, government, and everyday life. We hold and make available one of the most varied archive collections of records in Britain. We will now turn our attention to the Forfeited Estates papers. What are the Forfeited Estates papers? They are an extensive collection found among the Exchequer records in the NRS. The Exchequer is one of the earliest government departments that developed out of the King's Chamber and the branch of the King's household, which was responsible for the royal finances. These records cover almost all aspects of the revenue raising and expenditure of the Crown in Scotland pre and post the Union of 1707. Here is what we call the Fonds level entry or overview for the Exchequer records on the National Records of Scotland's online catalogue. The archive reference for the collection is a capital E, and each series, the level below Fonds, has a number attached to it, down to each file. For example, E777/1/1. The papers include records of the estates in Scotland forfeited to the Crown from the Jacobite landowners who were involved in the 1745 Rising over 279 years ago. The aim of this rising was to restore the Stuarts to the British throne. Previous attempts, such as the 1715, had all ended in failure. This final attempt was led by Charles Edward Stuart, in popular memory known as Bonnie Prince Charlie, grandson of the king forced out by the so-called Glorious Revolution of 1689. I have highlighted in red the portion of the summary of the Exchequer collection which relates to the Forfeited Estates papers. I will discuss the arrangement and how you can view the catalogue and access the records later on. The Rising of 1745 collapsed in the spring of 1746, the consequences of which were disastrous for those on the losing side, as its failure meant death, exile, or forfeiture of their estates. Almost 3,500 people were taken prisoner. Of these, 120 were executed and about 1,150 transported, and an unknown number died from fever in prison. The Jacobite leaders were tried and executed in London. Many who escaped abroad spent long periods in exile, often in poverty. Some of the exiles never saw Scotland again. When the Rising collapsed, a large number of estates in Scotland belonging to those who had been involved were forfeited to the Crown as a result of the treasonable activities of their owners. From the late summer of 1747, the management of these estates throughout much of Scotland was in the hands of the barons of the Scottish Court of Exchequer, who, as guardians of the Crown revenues in Scotland, were responsible for all forfeited property there. They were authorised by the so-called Vesting Act, which received royal assent on the 17th of June 1747, to survey the extent and value of the Scottish estates with the assistance of surveyors, to appoint factors, to levy the rents and profits, and to arrange for the determination of claims, and to organise the sale of both real and personal property, and finally the payment of creditors. 53 estates were surveyed by order of the Barons of Exchequer, and the Court of Session upheld claims to 12 and declared them not forfeited, but the rest fell to the management of the barons. For nearly 3/4 of a century, they were engaged in the complex business of administering this property and the funds arising from it. The administrative records are of considerable interest for the vivid snapshot they provide of life on these lands in the period before the Rising, the manner in which life was disrupted by the events of 1745-1746, and the vigorous efforts used during the years that followed to restore order and bring life back to a state of normality, particularly in the Highlands. The government took punitive measures against the Highlands as a whole to ensure that no further risings would take place. The Disarming Act ordered the surrender of firearms and banned the wearing of Highland dress. The Heritable Jurisdictions Act was intended to destroy the power of the chiefs over their clansmen by abolishing private jurisdictions. To enforce these acts and to ensure peace in the Highlands, the permanent military presence in the area was increased. In addition to punitive measures against the Highlands, the government also set about trying to, in their words, civilise social and economic conditions in the area in order to turn the inhabitants into loyal and industrious subjects and turn away from Jacobitism. Improvements in roads, agriculture and industry, the growth of villages, and the provision of education in English were all planned. To put these plans into practice, 14 of the forfeited Jacobite estates were annexed to the Crown, and their income used for these developments. The Annexing Act of the 26th of March 1752 provided for the use of funds from the forfeited estates annexed to the Crown to be used for improving conditions in the Highlands. An act for annexing certain forfeited estates in Scotland to the Crown unalienably, and for making satisfaction to the lawful creditors thereupon, and to establish a method of managing the same, and applying the rents and profits thereof for better civilising and improving the Highlands of Scotland, and preventing disorders there for the future. The responsibility for executing this unique scheme for the Highlands was placed in the hands of the commissioners appointed to the Crown. They were expected to devote themselves to the task without salary or reward, and for nearly 30 years they devoted themselves to implementing both the letter and spirit of the Annexing Act. They appointed factors who sent in detailed surveys of the property under their care. They reported on the existence or lack of amenities, such as schools and roads, described any local industries, and outlined farming practices. These reports provide a detailed picture of conditions in the Highlands in the mid-18th century. For example, in his report on the estate of Barrisdale, Inverness-shire, in 1755, the factor reports on the herring fishing on Loch Horn. It may be here observed that the only harbour or safe shelter for vessels to lie in during the seasons of fishing for heron in Loch Horn is upon the shores of Skirraree and Lee, two farms of the estate of Barrisdale, and that Col MacDonald, late of Barrisdale, was in use of exacting from the proprietors of each vessel or boat employed in the fishery a day's product each week of whatever fish they caught. The reports also document more unusual practices. In the barony of Balwhidder, we find there are 2 or 3 people in this barony who buy bear in the Low Country, carry it home and malt it, and distill it in aqua vitae. The opening up of the Highlands through improvements in roads and other forms of travel was key to the plans for reforming the area and ensuring that they were accessible. A memorial on the Highlands by James Erskine of Grange, written in October 1746, emphasised the necessity of improvements of communications. It is impossible that any country and the inhabitants thereof can be brought to a civilised state, good manners, and increasing improvements, except it be accessible for men and carriages, and this accessibleness cannot be obtained nor preserved without the things placed under this head, viz. Highways, bridges, fords, ferries, and harbours. This is too plain to need proof, and experience had already proved it as to roads and bridges in the Highlands. Everybody now knows it by those already made. In the 1720s and 1730s, the government's road-building programme under General Wade had been for military purposes. It was necessary to expand this system to allow communities to flourish and trade to develop. Along with roads went bridges, and the commissioners provided funds for road and bridge building all over the Highlands, often acting in conjunction with other agencies. In 1776, Hugh Seaton of Touch petitioned the commissioners that a considerable part of Argyllshire is to this day excluded from all the benefits resulting from good roads, in order to assist the local landowners and commissioners of supply in building a road through Glencoe. He described the disadvantages of the existing military road from Fort William to King's House over the mountains, now the route of the West Highland Way. The inhabitants whereof would find it more convenient to cross the narrow ferry of Ballachulish to get at once into a good road than as at present to go at first to Fort William and then follow the very bad line from thence to the Black Mount which leads over the tops of the Mamigrean, and other high and almost perpendicular hills, often impassable even upon horseback in winter, and almost so at all seasons for wheel carriages, whereas the proposed road will lie upon a plain along the seaside for several miles, and the ascent from thence through the glen to the military road near the King's House is but very gentle. This road will be attended with the advantage also of not being exposed to heavy falls of snow, which seldom lies for any time upon a sea coast, and it is indeed a strong argument in favour of this new line of road, that travellers frequently take it in winter, even in its present rugged state, while the high hill of Mamigrean is impassable from the depth of snow. One area the commissioners were keen to improve was Rannoch, which was infamous for lawlessness. To improve communications with the estate, they funded the building of a bridge over the Tummel at Kinloch Rannoch. The estimate of the bridge shows that in 1764 the cost was £531 and 9 shillings. The bridge is still in use today. Following on the new roads and bridges, which encouraged travel in the Highlands, a good standard of inns had to be provided to accommodate an increasing number of travellers. At the time, Highland inns had a dreadful reputation, and the commissioners subsidised many attempts to improve matters. In 1761, John MacDiarmid, the innkeeper at Callander, asked the commissioners for land to grow hay and corn on, as he had to buy it at high prices. He was keen to benefit from the village's strategic position on the new road between Stirling and Fort William. That Callander being the first stage from Stirling upon His Majesty's new highway leading from thence by the Black Mount to Fort William, and the petitioner's house being the only inn there, he is inclinable to make everything as convenient and comfortable as possible for the accommodation of passengers. Improvements to ferry services, harbours and piers, and the development of the canal system also met with the Commissioners' approval and encouragement. They received petitions from all over Scotland to build and improve harbours in the encouragement of trade. A 1779 petition and plan of Rothesay Harbour from the magistrates and town council of Rothesay for funds to improve the harbour stresses its importance for trade in the west of Scotland. That the harbour of Rothesay is of the greatest public utility to the shipping on the west coast of Scotland, being one of the safest harbours within the Mulls of Kintyre and Galloway to which shipping can have access, which it affords a safe and commodious retreat, being situated in a bay the form of which admits of their entering and getting out with the most earths of wind. That this harbour, which was about 20 years ago put in its present form at a very considerable expense, is at present in disrepair, and on account of the very great advantage that will result not only to the trade of the place itself, but to that of the west of Scotland, it is proposed to have it further improved, the expense of which will amount to £600 and upwards. The commissioners for the annexed estates were enthusiastic improvers. Their plans to modernise farming in the Highlands fitted well with the aim of making tenants less dependent on their chiefs. They were given security of tenure by the granting of long leases to those willing to carry out improvements. They also fostered good farming practice by giving premiums. A list of improvements in agriculture suggested by the commissioners in 1764 for tenants who wanted long leases included the abolition of run-rig farming, the straightening of boundaries between farms, good drainage, and the proper rotation of crops. The commissioners were concerned about poor yields of crops and consequent food shortages in the Highlands, and by giving premiums, encouraged tenants to plant potatoes earlier and store them for longer. A leaflet was issued listing the variety of potatoes available and giving instructions for storage. Every farmer knows how to raise potatoes, but if potatoes are intended to be kept till very late in the ensuing season, it is advisable, more particularly so in dry soils and situations, to let some part of them remain in the ground untouched, till the frosts are over in the spring, taking care to cover them up with straw, brackens, rushes, or heather in the month of October, to prevent the baneful effects of violent frosts. In an effort to utilise all of the area's natural resources, mineral surveys were carried out to judge the possibilities of coal mining on the estates. John Williams, a mining engineer, recorded his survey of the West Highlands in 1773. He visited Struntion to inquire for miners much hindered by the ferries, and attended several mining trials in the Fort William area. He also assessed the slate at Callat and Ballachulish. He felt that Callat slate was by far the best quality for the finest blue colour and best convenience for shipping. The development of industry was thought to be crucial in reforming the Highlands, and the emphasis was put on promoting linen manufacture and encouraging fishing. The commissioners invested considerable sums of money in trying to develop the linen industry in the Highlands, taking over the work of the Board of the Trustees for Manufacturers. The training of apprentices and young people in trades was one of the commissioners' favoured methods of fostering industry. A plan for a spinning school in Inverness was submitted by Lord Kaimes in 1763. The estimate includes sums for the maintenance of 50 girls from outside the town and for the salaries of itinerant teachers to go round the area. Lord Kaimes' plan illustrates how skills learned in school would be passed on. Nor of the families who live in the country ought any to be maintained, but one out of each family, who upon having their education perfected may teach the rest. After 6 months' teaching, they may gain their bread by their work. The commissioners also funded 4 linen manufacturing stations. One of these was at Glenmoriston, where Alexander Shaw, the manager, distributed spinning wheels to people in the area to increase population over the older method of spindles. The fishing industry was also encouraged, including the settlement of discharged sailors. This was not a very effective policy, but attempts to regulate the industry through the appointment of bailies had more success. In 1775, Archibald MacDonell, baillie for the area from Gairloch to Mull, reported to the commissioners on a successful herring fishing in Kintail and stressed the need to regulate the large number of boats. A very successful fishing commenced in Loch Long in Kintail, about 70 herring busses besides about 25 large open boats from Bute, Arran and Loch Fyne, and about 100 country boats. The narrowness of this loch and the strong currents occasions often great confusion among such a large fleet, and nothing but the presence of a justiciary baillie could have prevented great complaints. The commissioners also dealt with the problem of whisky smuggling. A memorial and representation from the Kirk Session of Comrie asked for the support of the Annex Commissioners in putting down illegal distilling and smuggling of malt whisky. However, the problem with dealing with whisky smuggling may be understood when it was noted that even the commissioner's factor on Cognac, Baillie Hector Mackenzie, was accused of involvement. The foundation of new villages was another method of bringing order and industry to the Highlands. These settlements were to be centres for manufacturing and a means of increasing the rental of the estates. Callander was one such village, where plans to develop the community with suitable industries were put into effect. John Leslie's plan of Callander in 1774 shows a soldiers' settlement, nursery garden, Roman camp, the bridge built by the commissioners, and a new fuse being laid out. These villages were also used to resettle soldiers and sailors after the 7 Years' War. This plan was intended to solve both the problem of providing jobs for returning servicemen and that of populating the new villages with skilled and disciplined workers. In 1763, an advertisement invited disbanded soldiers and sailors to settle on the annexed estates, promising rent-free housing and land. The commissioners were inundated with replies to the advert, and the factors on the estates had little time to prepare for the men's arrival. The settlements were not successful due to inadequate planning, underestimating costs, and misjudgments on the part of the commissioners. Unfortunately, not all the soldiers and sailors were sober and industrious citizens. The Church of Scotland also played its part in these villages, and churches were established to keep the Roman Catholicism and Episcopalianism of the Jacobites at bay. One of the Commissioner's more successful policies was tree planting. A nursery garden was established in Callander for planting on the estate and encouraging surrounding landowners to plant on their properties. A report on the garden by George Nicholson on the 15th of November 1774 shows the variety of trees stocked: laburnums, plane trees, beeches, elms, Scots firs, ash trees, chestnuts, spruces, silver firs, and hawthorn for hedging. In total, the garden had over 1 million trees at various stages of growth. He remarks in the report, "The county in general is very naked," which shows that large-scale planting was required. The commissioners had been authorised to erect public schools on their estates, as education was seen as the one main vehicles for reforming the Highlands. This was not only by teaching reading and writing, but also training in technical subjects to aid manufacturers in the settlements. Callander was very well provided for schools. There were schools for ordinary education, as well as a sewing school, cooking school, and a stocking or knitting school. You can also find petitions from school teachers to the commissioners in the records. For example, in the Perth Estate records, there are petitions and memorials from schoolmistresses from 1765 to 1780, as well as from school teachers at the soldiers' settlements from 1764 to 1779. The government's Highland policies did not themselves transform social and economic conditions in the area. The scale of operations, the range of plans, and shortage of funds inevitably led to a piecemeal approach. However, the road and bridge building and the afforestation did leave their mark, and the results of some forfeited estates projects can still be seen today. The projects funded from the annexed estates included a loan to the Forth and Clyde Canal Company, which when repaid was immediately loaned out to the Crinan Canal Company, a jail at Inverness, harbours at Cromarty, Peterhead and Queensferry, and several bridges, and a grant to the Highland Society. General Register House, which houses the National Archives of Scotland, was founded with a grant from the annexed estate funds. In 1765, £12,000, which would be just under £1,230,000 in today's money, was granted for the building of a proper repository for the public records of Scotland, due to the poor and unsuitable conditions in which the records were stored at the time. General Register House is still the headquarters of the National Records of Scotland today, and this year we are celebrating the 250th anniversary of the laying of the foundation stone in 1774. By the 1780s, attitudes to the Highlands had changed considerably. The fighting strength that had been such a threat in 1745 was now providing numerous recruits for the British Army. The remoteness of the area was now seen as advantageous as the first tourists arrived. By the 1780s, the Highlands were becoming fashionable and Jacobitism was attracting the first signs of romantic interest. The ban on Highland dress was repealed in 1782, and in 1784, the forfeited estates were returned to their owners. I'm now going to discuss the arrangement of the 1745 forfeited estate papers in NRS and how you can access them in the Historical Search Room at General Register House in Edinburgh. First, I'd recommend that you consult the NRS website. This will provide you with access to the catalogue. The research guides provide clear instructions on accessing some of our most popular record sets or research topics, such as our records of industrial history or the topic of crime and criminals. The link to the Historical and Digital Archive search rooms provides more information about using the search rooms and the services you can expect. We will cover these later on. You can access the NRS catalogue via the link to Catalogues and Indexes, or you can go to it directly with the following website address. We would strongly encourage that you explore the catalogue in advance of any visit to the archive to avoid disappointment and to make the most of your visit. The 1745 Forfeited Estate papers have been divided into two main groups. The first relate to the general management of the estates, both forfeited and annexed, the records of the Barons of Exchequer coming first, and then those of the commissioners of the annexed estates. The second includes the documents which relate to the particular management of the individual estates, both forfeited and annexed, arranged in particular order. In the case of the annexed estates, the records of the Barons of Exchequer appear first, followed by those of the commissioners. The further arrangement of the documents under each estate is intended to illustrate the way in which the administration was carried out. Within these are the rentals and surveys, then papers relating to claims, royal and treasury warrants, letters, petitions, papers relating to the general management of the property and its improvement, documents concerning its sale, if a forfeited estate, or its restoration, and lastly the factors' accounts. This general pattern has been followed for all the estates. Please note that I've not been able to capture the complete list of estate records available in this slide. To access the papers, you can start by looking first at the records of general management. The NRS reference is E700 to E733. For entries in minute books, letter books, general reports, etc. for a particular estate. There are rentals of all the estates with contents lists by name of the forfeited owners for the period 1747 to 1776 under the NRS reference E707, and rentals of particular estates under the reference number for that estate. These rentals include some judicial rentals, which are records of statements by tenants about their tenancies, or which supply slightly more information than an ordinary rental. In the particular management section, the NRS reference E734 to E788, you can find the documents relating to a specific estate organised by county and parish. For example, the records for Perth Estate, Perth County, can be found under reference E777. Using the NRS online catalogue, type in the reference E777 into the reference box and then click Search. This takes you to the search results page for E777, which has returned 346 matching records. You then click Display Catalogue Results, which takes you to the following page. This is the first page of search results for the records of the particular management of Perth Estate in Perth County. If you click on the reference E777, it gives you an overview of the records in this series and the parishes covered. For more information on any of the files listed below this, click on an entry, for example, E77/1. Once you have found a document or documents you would like to consult, for example, E777/1, you will need to submit a request to view the original records via the online catalogue, as the collection is outstored and only a small proportion of the records have been digitized. To place the order, select Click here to place an advance order for this record. This will take you to the advance order page where you need to provide your details and confirm the date you would like to visit. You can order up to 12 items per day, but need to allow 3 working days notice to produce records held off-site. For any records held on-site, they do not need to be ordered in advance of your visit and can be requested on the day. If you would like to consult a document which has been digitised, you can view the images in the Digital Archive search room adjacent to the Historical search room. These search rooms are located on the first floor of General Register House and are open Monday to Friday from 9 a.m. to 4:30. Before you consult any physical or digital records, you will need to obtain a reader's ticket. Details of what you need to bring with you, what to expect, and the services provided can be found on the search room pages on the NRS website. If you are unable to visit the search room in person, you may wish to employ a professional researcher to consult the records on your behalf, and you can find a list of names on the NRS website. Two useful publications from the Forfeited Estates papers are the reports on the annexed estates from 1755 to 1769 and statistics of the annexed estates 1755 to 1756. These give detailed information about some but not all of the estates at that time. I'll provide details of these in a separate handout. There is also a published list of tenants on some of these estates in 1755 in the Statistics publication. If you are new to research using original records, the free Scottish handwriting resource on the Scotland's People website provides practical online tuition to help improve your skills. Assistance is also provided in our Scottish handwriting kit. You can purchase a paper copy from Scotland's People or download an e-version for free from the NRS website. You could also sign up for the University of Glasgow's Future Learn course on early modern Scottish paleography. The Dictionaries of the Scots Language is a culmination of two major dictionaries of the Scots language in a searchable format. The resource provides invaluable assistance with tracking down the meaning and historical origin of Scots words. You can explore more stories we have found in our records on the News and Articles page on the Scotland's People website, as well as on the NRS blog Open Book. You can keep up to date with news and events by subscribing to the Scotland's People newsletter and by following NRS and Scotland's People on X and Facebook. Thank you for listening to this talk. I hope you have found it useful for your research. I am indebted to former colleagues for the wonderful resources they created on the Forfeited Estates for past exhibitions and booklets, which have formed the basis of this talk with their rich and informative examples. I'm happy to answer any questions after this talk. If you have any further questions after today's conference, please get in touch with me at education@nrscotland.gov.uk. Goodbye.